This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by ItaliancitizenshipAssistance.com. Of course, we are back here again with the one and only Italian attorney, Marco Permunian. How you doing, man?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And today, we wanted to talk about something that comes up from time to time, something that many people will find during their process for Italian citizenship by descent, that they may have a relative who may not be interested in helping them with getting information or so on, or maybe even like a parent or a grandparent that this person has become estranged from and there's no communication there, if the relatives are alive, for example. So we wanted to get into how involved does your family need to be? Do you need their help for this process? Just because this can come up. So Marco, I know you've run across this plenty of times during the years that you've gone and helped people with this process. What are maybe some of the more common situations that people find themselves in, and how do you get around them?
Maybe we can start from the scenario that you just mentioned. What if you have a family member who you're estranged from or doesn't want to cooperate? Is it necessary to have the help of a relative who is in your Italian line, like a parent or grandparent, or even a relative who is not in the Italian line, to apply for citizenship by descent? And the answer is you may need the help of your relatives to apply for citizenship by descent. But of course, it depends on the specific situation, because if you have a living ascendant, father or a mother or a grandmother who is in the Italian line, they may need to sign an affidavit that is necessary for you to be able to apply for citizenship by descent. It's called form number 3, which is normally in the list of required forms that you need to present when you apply for citizenship by descent. So if you have a mother that is in the Italian line and you are estranged from your mother, it may not be possible for you to apply for Italian citizenship just because of this single document that she would have to sign and that allows you to apply for citizenship by descent. And make no mistake, we're not talking about your mother applying or not applying for citizenship with you or separately. We're talking about the need for your parent or grandparent or whoever is alive in the Italian line to sign this form that is called form number 3. Now, this form is only required for people who apply for citizenship through a consulate. For people who apply for citizenship in Italy, normally this form is not necessary. And the purpose of this form is basically for the living ascendant to self-declare that they never renounced their right to Italian citizenship. We talked about this in many videos, and it was quite unlikely for an intermediate ascendant who was born in the US to even know that they had Italian citizenship or the right to Italian citizenship. So it's almost impossible that they went ahead and renounced their Italian citizenship unless they acquired a foreign citizenship. For example, if you have a father who went to live in, Mexico and got Mexican citizenship, well, it's possible in that scenario that your father actually lost his right to Italian citizenship when he acquired Mexican citizenship. But otherwise, it's quite unlikely for an ascendant to have renounced their right to Italian citizenship. But nonetheless, that document, that form is necessary if you want to apply for citizenship by descent. So in conclusion, you will need your living ascendants to sign this form number 3 if you are applying for citizenship through a consulate in America, but you don't need them to sign the same form, so you don't need their cooperation if you are applying for citizenship in Italy, at least with regard to this specific form number 3.
And so, just, I guess, would there be any other situations where you would need help from relatives, maybe even relatives not in the Italian line?
Well, that's a good point, because if you're applying for citizenship through a consulate in the US, in some situations you will need, depending on the consulate, birth certificates and death certificates for the individuals that are not in the Italian line but are married to the individuals in the Italian line. So, for example, even if you're applying for citizenship through your father, you may need, depending on the consulate that you're using, your mother's birth certificate. But if you are estranged from your mother and it's a situation where your mother is the only person by law entitled to request her birth certificate, well, you're not going to be able to get it, and it's a required document, meaning that if you look at the list of required documents on the website of the consulate, you're going to see both of your parents' birth certificates. So what do you do in this situation? Well, let's say that it's a complex situation, and you may solve the situation by deciding to apply in Italy, because normally when you apply in Italy, only the birth, marriage, and death certificates for the individuals in the Italian line are necessary. Or you may try to talk to the consulate, and that could actually work because the thing is, by law, you only need birth, marriage, and death certificate for the individuals in the Italian line to apply for citizenship by descent. But some consulates, many consulates, also require the birth and death certificates for the individuals that are not in the Italian line, but that's not what the law says. They just want them. They want them because they want to cross-reference the information. They want to be sure that you're not presenting documents pertaining to somebody else. So, for example, they want your mother's birth certificate to make sure that the marriage record between your parents that you presented is actually the marriage record between your parents. So they want to see who your mother is, but that's not what the law says. So you can try to argue with them and say, hey, my mom's not in the Italian line. She refused to give me her birth certificate or to sign for her birth certificate. I have no legal way of getting it. Can I apply anyway? And because she's not in the Italian line, I want to say they should say yes. And we were actually able to bypass this problem in the past by talking to the consulate. And in the end, they were accepting the fact that the law was not requiring this birth certificate, but they were. So they were okay with letting that go in that specific situation. So ultimately, to answer your question, you may need the help of other relatives. So I just gave an example regarding your mother, but it could be your grandmother. So you may need the consent from other relatives that are not in the Italian line so that they give permission to acquire their vital records. It could be their birth certificate or marriage record. So yes, you may need other relatives to be involved, depending on the case. It could be that all of your relatives that are not in the Italian line were born in a state where the laws allow you to get their birth certificates without even contacting them. So it depends on the specific case, but you may need their help. There may also be situations where you are wanting to apply in Italy, so no Form 3 is required, but your father is not giving his consent to get his birth certificate, and your father is in the Italian line, and you're estranged from him, or you don't have a good relationship. Now, in some cases, you may be able to petition the court to have the court order the release of your parent's birth certificate. If your parent is the one in the Italian line, and if you have no other legal ways of getting it, it may not be an easy process, but it's doable. And ultimately, you do need the birth certificate. So if you are unable to access it because your father or mother don't give their consent, or because there's no other way for you to get it, you won't be able to apply for citizenship. So you do need it, and I say you should do like all you can to unlock the situation and get a birth certificate or a marriage record for somebody who is in the Italian line, because those documents are required, and without them, you can't apply for citizenship by descent.
That's a tough one. It's really unfortunate that a person may find themselves in this situation where they may have to petition a court to go for a document that shouldn't be as difficult as that. But what about maybe on the other side, the flip side of the coin, where you do have a relationship with your family, but even maybe in the situation where you don't have a relationship with certain family members in your direct line, is it important for them, say, for example, if it's your father or your mother or whoever it may be, would they have had to gone through the process before you, or does it help you if they've gone through the process before you have? Does it make any difference? Or if they're not interested at all, or become interested at a later date, is it okay for you to just do it without having to do things, quote unquote, in order?
So it's not necessary for your relatives in the Italian line who are alive, so a parent or a grandparent, to have gone through the process for you to be able to go through the process. It's not even necessary for them to apply together with you if they're not interested. And they will not get citizenship if they don't apply. So it's not that you can apply also on their behalf. In other words, if you have a father who is in the Italian line and he's not really interested in getting Italian citizenship, doesn't want to be bothered with that, you can go through the process by yourself and your father won't get Italian citizenship automatically. They will still need to sign this form number 3 that I mentioned before. If you are going through the consulate, they may have to give permission to release their birth certificate or marriage record, but they don't have to be an applicant. So they don't have to formally apply for citizenship. And if you apply, they won't get citizenship just because you applied for citizenship. Now, there's also another question that you asked me, which would be, what if they already applied? Is it going to be easier for you if they already got citizenship? And the answer is, it may be. So in this opposite scenario where your parent or grandparent already went through the process and they are in your Italian line and they got citizenship years before you, you may be able to use the documents that they use for the process as long as you use the same consulate. So if you are applying through the Chicago consulate and your father applied for citizenship through the Chicago consulate 5 years before you, well, all the documents that you use will be already on file at the consulate. So it may be easier for you to go through the process because you don't have to get all those documents again. Of course, my suggestion would be make sure that the consulate still has those documents on file. But if they do, you wouldn't have to get them again, which could be a huge advantage because you don't have to, get maybe your great-grandfather's birth certificate from Italy again or your grandfather's records because they will be already on file at the consulate.
Interesting. That's great if it would be in that type of situation where you wouldn't have to get some of those documents just because sometimes they can be quite complicated to find. But I guess kind of on that thought process, what if, for example, maybe going back again to the situation where a person may not have a relationship with their family, they've become estranged for whatever reason, they're not talking anymore. What would it be like to go through and find some of these records, say if maybe somebody doesn't have this information? I know this is something that you guys will do at Italiancitizenshipassistance.com. You do a lot of research to find out details about a person's family that they may not even know. What would you recommend in that case for somebody to be able to find out? Like, for example, they know they have Italian ancestry, but that's kind of about where it ends, and they can't ask anybody in their family. What would you maybe say you would recommend to that person, or what is it the process that you actually go through at ICA when you're helping people in this situation?
So in this particular situation, of course, having the help of your relatives will likely help you in the process, improve your chances that you're going to be able to acquire all of the information that you need to then collect the documents that are necessary for the process. But it's not that if you are unable to talk to your relatives to gather information that you won't be able to go through the process. For example, it could be even that your relatives are all deceased. Maybe you are somebody who, doesn't have their parents anymore, grandparents, and like you said, all you know is that you are of Italian descent. So you have nobody to ask to. Maybe you only have distant relatives that you don't really talk to. There are websites and databases that you can use to basically put a family tree together. And that's something that at ICA we do on a regular basis. I've said this in other videos. We offer a free preliminary assessment of our clients' cases where we actually do the research and try to put back together the family tree as best as we can. Even if it's a preliminary phase, we want to be sure that we have all the basic information to at least establish with some level of certainty that the person qualifies for Italian citizenship by descent. So we use databases and websites, and I have to say it here, they're very well done. They have a lot of information, a lot of records, records from Ellis Island, naturalization records, census records, city directories. So if you are good at using these databases, you can find a lot of information. And also the fact is that because of when the Italian emigration started, which would be in the late 1800s, it was a time when records were actually very well kept. So on these databases, you can find the actual records of birth and marriage and census and naturalization. If you had to go further back, before the late 1800s, it would be more difficult for you to locate records, even in Italy, because it was like pre-unification. But we're talking about a time where records were very well kept. So you have all the resources and the tools to do the research yourself or through us if you want to use ICA. So even if you don't have relatives that are alive or willing to help, you can still be able to build your family tree and be able to move forward with the process.
That's great that it's even possible to put all of these together. But I'm just also curious, is there any way that maybe, again, talking about someone who might not have a great relationship with their family, is there anything that maybe one of these family members can do to not necessarily forbid, but to throw a wrench into the mix and not allow their descendant to go through, their child, their grandchild, that they can? Is there a way that they can block them from being able to go through this, or does that not exist?
Well, formally, no. So there is no tool that they have at their disposal to block an application for citizenship by descent. So if the records that you need are public and you can apply in Italy without having your intermediate descendants to sign this form that I was referring to, well, you can apply even if they don't want you to. Of course, there are practical ways that they can put in place for them to potentially be able to block your application, meaning that if they don't want to give their consent for you to get their birth certificate or their marriage record, and if you're unable to get those records legally through other means, well, you may not be able eventually to apply for citizenship. But to answer your question, there is no legal tool at their disposal to actually block your application or forbid that you apply for citizenship.
Well, that's great. That's definitely something that may help certain people. Unfortunately, there can be family members out there that a person may have to deal with during this process, and at least try to reach out to. I know there are plenty of people who have reached out to family members that they've never spoken to in their lives, or that they haven't spoken to in many years. And I think it's great that we're able to get through this to kind of give some people some tools that they can work with. And also for those who decide to work with Italiancitizenshipassistance.com to understand a little bit better how you guys approach the situation and actually move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And one probably last thing that I wanted to mention is that at ICA, we make sure to tell our clients or potential clients when and what circumstances they will need the cooperation of the relatives before they start the process. So we are sure to tell our clients or potential clients, you will need your father or grandfather to sign this document or that document, so that they know already if they have to interact with their relatives, especially the ones in the Italian line, before they make the commitment to start the process, and even before they engage your services.
No, that's great. And actually, I guess just one last little quick question before we finish off for this episode. I'm assuming, of course, the best course of action when possible is for a person to be able to make contact themselves. However, do you ever find that there are extreme circumstances where a person will not want to contact their relative? And do you offer that as a service to your clients to be able to go and contact these relatives on their behalf?
Yeah, for sure. Of course, we're talking about extreme situations, but
Right.
we've dealt with these situations before where one of our clients didn't want to deal with a family member because they didn't talk for a long time, and they wanted us to be involved. And that's by all means something that we can do for our clients,
Right.
and make contact with relatives to ensure their cooperation during the process.
Oh, that's fantastic. And this is so great to be able to shed some light on what may be necessary to do and how maybe it may be possible to go through this, whether you're doing it on your own or even to understand better if you're working with Italiancitizenshipassistance.com, how things look on the back end and what things look like, and kind of to give people tools at their disposal to be able to move forward through the process of making that claim for Italian citizenship. But of course, Marco, if anybody is needing help with the claim for Italian citizenship, how can they get in contact with you and your team?
People can contact us through our website, Italiancitizenshipassistance.com, or give us a call. The number is on the website.
Absolutely fantastic. And of course, if you're interested in more content like this about Italian citizenship, living in Italy, and all of the different routes for getting Italian citizenship by descent, through marriage, or through residency, be sure that you are subscribed to this YouTube channel as well as the audio-only podcast. But of course, if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, then you are also automatically subscribed to the Italian Real Estate Podcast, the other project that Marco and I also collaborate on. Of course, though, also, if you're interested in any more content about life abroad, living abroad as an Italian dual citizen expat in Italy or the EU, and getting to see a little bit more of also life in these places, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia, or you can also search for Not Your Average Globetrotter on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app for the audio-only version of the podcast. But of course, thank you so much for joining us again. We have been here with Italian attorney Marco Permunian from Italiancitizenshipassistance.com. I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.
See ya.